Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the 7th episode of Pure Grade Progress. Today I'm going to be looking at the final 4 days of New Japan's New Japan Cup for 2019. So we're going to be covering the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, the finals obviously, and I'm going to be giving a few thoughts to what I think of the tournament overall. So as usual, I am on a sort of a strict time schedule, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time bullshitting at the start. Let's just jump right into it. So our first show for these quarterfinals. This was on March 20th from Shizuoka. The first match was between Ishii and Yoshi-Hashi. And holy shit, I did not expect this to be as... This wasn't even good. This wasn't even great. This was outstanding. This was a fantastic match. This was the best Yoshi-Hashi match I have ever seen. Okay? And I know to some people it's like, oh yeah, it's Yoshi-Hashi, that's not saying much. Like, okay, you guys haven't been paying attention for the last 4 years. Yoshi-Hashi has been very good. Okay, usually he's all right, usually he's okay, but he has been very good and even great at sometimes, and this was fantastic. This was even better than his match with Ibushi from last year's New Japan Cup. So yeah, this was outstanding, so I guess I'll just jump into it. So at the start, we've got Ishii. He's really struggling at the start, and Yoshi-Hashi's actually applying a lot of holds, and so that was a bit surprising, but eventually Ishii does start, unloading his usual strikes and moves, sort of making clear, okay, yeah, Yoshi-Hashi, you're getting in a few lucky moments here, but I am still the Stone Pitbull, you're not getting past me here. And Yoshi, I'm just going to call him Yoshi, by the way, just because Yoshi-Hashi, nice name, too long. So Yoshi, he started firing up, and he was throwing some really stiff strikes of his own, and that was basically the story of the match. It was that he was always constantly trying to stand up to Ishii. He was trying to, match him for strikes, and there are actually a few moments where he would actually get the better of Ishii with strikes. He'd throw his own, stiff chops or something, and, genuinely, his chops throughout this entire match were way stiffer than Ishii's. Now, think about that. Ishii, one of the stiffest strikers out there. Would you say stiffest? I guess, well, he's a very prominent figure in the strong style scene in wrestling. And the fact that Yoshi-Hashi was able to get his chops way sharper than Ishii, that really says something, because Yoshi-Hashi, he was desperate to really put on a show here. He was acting way more aggressive than we've really ever seen from him, and he was even trying to stand up to Ishii's strikes, and he actually even stole Ishii's, it's like his strike and then his forearm combo. That's the combo that Ishii always does in the corner, and Yoshi-Hashi stole that, and obviously it looked a bit awkward because, it's a guy who never actually does this combo, and here he is stealing it against the guy who actually does the combo. So yeah, it looked a bit awkward, but it was still really cool. I appreciate the idea of Ishii being like, okay, this dude, he's in my stable, he's in Chaos, he's known for being one of the hardest brawlers out there, but I'm going to do my best to show him, okay, I may be a fucking little dork in New Japan that most people sort of pass off as a joke, but I can be serious when I want to. And it was fan-fucking-tastic seeing Yoshi-Hashi fire up, and not only his fire-up moments where you could see, okay, there's so much, dedication and conviction in his performance, but even when he was selling, he was doing a fantastic job, because Ishii would smack the shit out of him, and Yoshi-Hashi, his body would crumble, it would sort of almost fold in two, and his face would look like, it's being melted off, his face looked like it was being melted off his head, I guess I'm trying to say. He was doing a fantastic job. This made Yoshi-Hashi just a pure baby face, and that's funny because it's usually Ishii who is the baby face, isn't it? Because he's the guy who's always the underdog. He can beat anyone, but he never really makes it to the top. And there were genuinely moments in this match where I'm thinking, holy fucking shit, is Yoshi-Hashi of all people going to beat Ishii of all people? Because there were some moments where Yoshi-Hashi was getting fantastic momentum, and Ishii had already gotten in his big spots where it's okay, yeah, match is over. Well, I guess I didn't really ever think that, because I know with Ishii, until he hits his brain buster, the match is never over. But there were some really, really great near falls where Ishii just, absolutely clobbers Yoshi-Hashi with a massive lariat or, some other strike flurries. And I was like, okay, my mind's tricking me. Maybe Ishii's going to get the win here. But no, Yoshi-Hashi just continued going. And the match just went, whenever you think, okay, the match could easily end here, it just continued going on. Where you're like, okay, he's got him up in the brainbuster position. He's going to end it right now. No, Yoshi-Hashi just continues fighting. And at the end of the match, Ishii was having to absolutely destroy Yoshi-Hashi to finally put him away. So he ended up hitting the brainbuster. Oh, and that was before Yoshi-Hashi. He was not just going to have a strong start and middle portion of this match. Even at the end, when he's getting destroyed and it's really all Ishii at that moment, his selling and bumping was still fantastic, and he even got some really great cradle pin attempts. So it was he's so desperate, he's going for some sort of crafty, speedy attacks to try get the win. But sadly, it wasn't the case. I was thinking to myself, okay, if Yoshi-Hashi wins this match, this is a massive issue, because Yoshi-Hashi, as much as I like him, as much as he has that dorky, try-hard charm of his, he does not belong in the final four of a major New Japan tournament. But the performance he gave here, I was like, holy shit, Yoshi-Hashi, you did fucking well in this match. This is your best match ever. You deserve a title reign at some point. You've never held a title in New Japan, and that is criminal when you think of other people who have, such as, David Finlay. Not to throw shade on him, it's just, he's relatively, a non-entity in New Japan. Who else is there? There's I was going to say Taguchi, but Taguchi's actually a very good wrestler, but he's not like a serious contender in New Japan. Yoshi-Hashi has actually been working hard for so many years now, at least I'd say since 2016, so at least 3 years. I mean, I guess it's coming up to 4. And yeah, he's just never gotten a title reign, like never even like a tag title reign. And like, I'm not saying, he needs to win the never title, which I think is his absolute limit, by the way, but he does deserve to have like a tag team title run or something, just give him something small. Anyways, just to finish off my review of this match, I thought this was fantastic. At the time I watched it, this was the clear match of the tournament for me. There was nothing else in the previous rounds that came close to this, so I went 4.25 on this, and if you know me and you know my rather strict rating, that's actually pretty big. I was surprised on Cage Match it didn't get higher ratings. I believe Meltzer gave it 4.25 as well, and at least I think, no, Meltzer gave it 4 stars, and then the Cage Match rating is like 7.6, and I'm just thinking to myself, damn, did you fucking idiots see how much drama there was? Did you like feel that atmosphere? Jesus, I just don't think Yoshi-Hashi gets the respect he deserves. Anyways, what was my point? Oh yeah, this match, 4.25 stars, really, really fantastic match. Let's move on to the next match on the show, which actually ended up surpassing it just slightly. So this was Okada versus Ospreay. So obviously there's history here with, similar to how Ishii versus Yoshi-Hashi was a Chaos versus Chaos match, that was the same case here. And this also referred back to how Ospreay and Okada had their only other singles match in New Japan last year. Around the same time, this was at the anniversary show last year, and back then this match here was very similar to their match back at the anniversary show, and that it was sort of, a fine like opening first half, I'd say, with like a bit of character work more so at the forefront, and a bit of some fun moments of posturing and sort of one-upsmanship. And then we had like the second half where it's just a bunch of crazy counters, a lot of creativity in all of the exchanges, and like perfect chemistry. It was the character work early on which really made the slower grappling exchanges still rather interesting, because you've got Okada and he's being a bit cheeky and, a bit arrogant. He's like, okay, here's the guy I brought into Chaos all those years ago. He's finally graduated to being a heavyweight, so he's finally fighting me, I guess, on my own terms. And, I still think I can get the better of him. And then you've got Ospreay, who he's getting a bit dominated, but he's still trying to, be extravagant and flashy and show, okay, yeah, Okada, you may be, I guess, sort of my senpai, but, I am still, shocking people in my own way. I don't need to just rely on you, and I actually might even be able to surpass you here. So I really enjoyed that, and it was great because we got to see heel Okada here, and heel Okada is like something you see once in a blue moon, because that used to be like the staple, like all throughout 2012 and even a bit of 2013, I think. He was just a straight heel, and it was fantastic because Okada, as much as I love him as a babyface, he's like the guy I will always support no matter what, at least I think. He is so fantastic as a heel because he just has a face for a brick, especially when he's got back before he got his teeth fixed up, they were even more like all fucked up and messed up. They actually sort of look like my teeth before I got braces. And so I always, like, whenever he lets out that evil smile of his when he plays the heel like he did here, you can see like the remnants of his teeth before they were like, perfectly fixed, because some of them are still out of line. Why am I even talking about his teeth? I guess I'm just trying to say he has the perfect role to play a villain. And, he's still got such a long future ahead of him. I wouldn't be surprised, or at least, no, I shouldn't say that. I will say, I hope we see a decent heel Okada run, because that's what I thought his long reign, his 700-day plus reign, I thought he was going to end up being a heel, like a pure heel by the end of that, but that didn't happen. So yeah, in future I want to see that. Anyways, this match was fucking awesome. Okada was mostly in control throughout the start and middle of the match, and it was very fun. He was just running through all of his signature moves. He was sort of playing the, how when Okada's in control and he's sort of, I don't know if it's intentional, but maybe it's just his character sort of, subconsciously, he just like exudes an aura of being calm, where it's like, oh yep, I'm just running off the ropes, hitting a really stiff kick to the guy. I'm coming off the top rope, hitting a massive, missile, like shotgun drop kick or whatever they call that. And, I'm not showing too much emotion because, hey, I'm the best wrestler in the world. I don't take, why would I break a sweat for this? Even if it's Ospreay, who cares about that dude? And I've made this point before. It's sort of similar with Naito, where some people think, oh, because Okada doesn't show like he's, worried that much, or he doesn't show too much care, other people find difficulty then sympathizing with Okada. But to me, it's totally different. And that's the same with Naito, where it's like, wow, this guy, he can, he's so dominant and he barely even seems to be caring. Imagine what he's going to be like when he does care. And obviously I've followed Okada for, at least 4, almost coming up to 5 years now, so it's easier for me to sympathize with Okada as well. But at the same time, I love Ospreay. Ospreay is my favorite gaijin, like in general, and I guess he's generally one of my top favorite 5 wrestlers in the world as well. The dude always goes out there and just has fantastic match after fantastic match. Like, I don't think, he hasn't he's had some matches where it's been like, oh, he got a good match out of Fale, 3 stars. But can you actually think of a bad Ospreay match? Like, unless you're just biased against Ospreay matches, which, hey, fair enough if you are. I'm not going to, no judgment call. If you're just like, I can't get into the dude, then fair enough. But if you like Ospreay, if you're like, oh yeah, Ospreay, he's at least good, can you think of a bad match he's had? Because I genuinely can't, or at least I can't think of a bad performance Ospreay has ever had. Like, in the time I've been watching him, even when I've gone back and watched some of his stuff from like early Progress, he has never been a bad wrestler at all. He's never, at least from what I've seen, he's never had like a growing phase where it's like, oh, he's trying some stuff and it's not really coming off well and he looks really, really bad or awkward or anything. Like, that's the thing, is Ospreay, even though he does wear green for his tights sometimes, has he himself ever actually been green? Interesting point there with a bit of a pun from me. Anyways, the match was very fun. Okada, he's dominant for ages. I'm finally getting back to actually talking about the match. And eventually, obviously, as expected, Ospreay sort of ups his aggression and he forces Okada to sort of play on his terms, where Ospreay's bringing out all of his big signature moves, and obviously they're very energetic and aerial. And Okada, his offense is more, I guess just purely athletic, a lot of jumping, sort of moves coming off the ropes, where, and I guess some more flashy moves, speed based. But then Ospreay, his speed and acrobatics are just out of this world. So we got a really nice mix. And then like the entire, I'd say the final 10 minutes, we got a bunch of nice spots where it's both guys, trading signature moves, or I guess countering signature moves. We got a bunch of counters on counters. It was really awesome. And the final 5 minutes was absolutely fantastic. At the start of this big move trading sequence, it sort of felt like there was a bit of a spark maybe missing, because even though the chemistry was really good, it felt like maybe both guys were, I guess slightly lifeless. Like Okada, he was sort of sinking into a bit of a robotic role where it's like, okay, I'm just moving from spot to spot. And Ospreay was the same to some extent, but they didn't last long, as eventually the exchanges did become much more creative, and how it's like, oh, what's Ospreay going to do? And then Okada's going to do this crazy move to get out of this, but then Ospreay's going to do this crazy and, innovative move to get out of this. So it was really, very consuming in the final 5 minutes, where you're like, okay, shit, I could imagine Ospreay getting a massive upset over his master here. Not really his master, but, the guy he looks up to in his stable. But I could also imagine just Okada being Okada, being Superman and putting Ospreay away. And there was great selling from Okada. He just showed total shock and pain from all of Ospreay's crazy precise attacks. And, we're getting some, typical fantastic Okada 2.99999 kickouts from all of Ospreay's big moves. There's also an awesome moment where Okada, obviously whenever he goes for the actual like Rainmaker pose, where he poses in the ring, lifts out his arms and the camera zooms out, you always know that is never going to lead to the actual Rainmaker that will finish the match. I don't think that's happened in maybe ever since like 2012. Maybe has it even ever happened? Has that always just been a tease? Who knows? But I know it hasn't happened for like the last 5 years that I've been watching. And as Okada was doing that, if I finally return to my point, Ospreay just hit a massive like roundhouse kick just as Okada moved his arms out of the way to defend himself. And I thought that was like a fantastic little moment, especially because it happens just as the camera zooms out. So you have to sort of squint, and you're like, oh shit, Ospreay just totally decked Okada. Anyways, the match just continued. The match just continued. Obviously, Lewis, I meant to say the exchanges just continued to get, crazier and crazier, and they were getting less and less awkward as they were earlier in the match, when it was sort of, I guess earlier in the match is in a few minutes ago, where it was sort of like they were just running through the sequences, but at this point, it really felt like, okay, the emotions here, both guys are really going for it, big moves, big bombs both ways, and in the end, Okada got the win after a Revolution Tombstone and the Rainmaker, and therefore he's making his way to the semifinals. So this was yet another amazing match. I also gave this 4.25 stars, just like Yoshi-Hashi versus Ishii, but I did enjoy this match just a bit more because I can really easily sympathize with the characters of Okada and Ospreay. I think there's much more to their backstory in New Japan than there is with Yoshi-Hashi or Ishii, and I think they just have fantastic chemistry, whereas Ishii and Yoshi-Hashi, they're two very different matches, so I can't really fairly compare them, but that match, Ishii and Yoshi-Hashi, was a bit more about, fighting spirit and, stiff strikes, stiff offense, just never giving up. But here it was sort of, this match was about like two absolute stars, both very different offense styles, but, mixing them seamlessly, obviously being like, two of the biggest stars in their stable, just desperately trying to put each other away. And yeah, I love this match because I go in with a bias because I already love both guys. And so this match also, I was surprised at how low this was getting rated. This got 4.25 stars from Meltzer, which again is what I gave it. but the cage match rating was like 7.6, pretty much exactly the same as Yoshi-Hashi versus Ishii. And I was looking at the rating, and it wasn't like there was a big number of people saying, wow, this match is awesome, 4.75 stars, and then there were like also a bunch of, a vocal minority saying, wow, this is awful, Ospreay can't sell, Okada can't sell, 0 out of 10, worst match ever. There weren't a lot of those. There were mostly people saying, oh yeah, this is a great match, but also a lot of people just saying, oh yeah, it was good, or it was all right. So I was really surprised by this. Like, people genuinely, I guess, think that like Sonata versus Suzuki and Ishii versus Nagata from earlier in this tournament were better than this. And for me, it was absolutely clear that Okada versus Ospreay was way superior to any other match that had come thus far in the tournament, except for maybe Yoshi-Hashi versus Ishii, which I could totally understand some people thinking was a better match just because, they more easily connect with that style. Anyways, let's move on. We are now going to March 21st from Hamamatsu Shizuoka, and the first quarterfinal here was between Colt Cabana and Sonata. First of all, I just have to give a big shout out to Colt Cabana because, hey dude, these reviews take a long time to write, but luckily when I watch your matches, I don't have too much to say, so, I get through them rather quickly. And it may sound like, oh, I'm being a bit ironic, I'm trying to, criticize him, but I thought this match was actually fine. This was definitely Colt Cabana's best match of the tournament. So it started off, we had some fine, slightly comedy-based grappling to start off with, and it's much more fun seeing Cabana play this style of, intelligent, sneaky grappling, as opposed to like, a sort of bumbling fool who just so happens to slip on a banana peel and somehow end up winning the match. And that's because Sonata, he's also known to play comedy matches. I expected this would be a pretty decent comedy match at points because Sonata's had those similar matches with Yano, where it's like, oh, the grappling, he can tie Yano up this way, and he sort of did that with Cabana here as well. But yeah, I enjoyed this, I guess, sort of mix of styles where he had the grappling from both guys, which Cabana himself is actually, very decent with. That's sort of his whole thing. He's got the crazy, holds he can pull out of anywhere. He's sort of like Zack Sabre Jr., I guess, instead of Zack Sabre Jr. going to university, he just sort of like bummed around for like 10 years and never really got a job. This is what Cabana, I'm making a clear point here. Cabana would have been Zack Sabre Jr. No, Zack Sabre Jr. would have been Colt Cabana if Zack Sabre Jr. just took 10 years off from life. But yeah, the match slowly became a bit more monotonous, as at one point Cabana was just like, nah, I'm just going to roll out to the outside and I'm going to, take my time, sort of play up how I've been injured by all of Sonata's grappling attacks, and that sort of killed the match for a bit. At first I was really interested in it, and then it was like, oh, we're going to go for a few more comedy spots. We're not going to be as, interesting and complex in our grappling, even if it is, a bit, sort of silly, where it's like, oh, Cabana can do all these crazy moves to get a hold of Sonata. It was still fun seeing that. After a while, we sort of moved into, I guess, what is the equivalent of like a New Japan big finishing stretch with, moves traded back and forth and back and forth. But because this was a rather heavy, like, comedy match, a sort of non-serious grappling match at that, and it didn't have a proper build-up, it didn't really have any of the drama that comes with your typical big New Japan finishing stretch. And a few moments where Cabana was either going for like a big comedy spot or was actually going for a big sort of upset spot, they didn't really get the proper connection. And that was usually because Cabana would sort of execute the move with bad timing, or if it was an actual wrestling move, he would execute it sort of sloppishly, whatever the word is. So yeah, that was a bit disappointing. But Sonata, he was trying to get that dragon sleeper on all match long. Obviously that led to a lot of moments where Cabana would just slip out and be like, nope, you're getting tossed over your shoulder. But finally Sonata locked his legs around that hold, and rather quickly he got the tap out from Cabana. So that was pretty cool. And this was actually end up playing into the rest of Sonata's tournament matches in the semifinals and also, spoilers, the finals. So yeah, this was a fine match. I'm just glad that Sonata won. We did get a few moments, I think, where it's like, oh, Cabana, is he really going to pull it out? Is he going to go on this miracle run? But I never really seriously expected him to have any chance in this match. So I was pretty safe in thinking, no, my boy Sonata, not really my boy, just someone I hope to become my boy. I'm like, Sonata, he's doing well, he's going to win this match. And yeah, so 3 stars for this. Nothing too special, but if you're into Cabana, then I'd say check it out. Also, if you're into Sonata, obviously, then also check it out. We now come to our final quarterfinal, and this was between Zack Sabre Jr. and Hiroshi Tanahashi. So going into this match, I was very resigned to the fact that Tanahashi's losing here. Sabre has been beating all these, guys. He basically won the feud with Naito last year before Naito got his win back at, Power Struggle or something. And Sabre won the entire tournament last year. And in this tournament, he's already beaten Evil. He's beaten Ibushi. Now I was like, okay, he's definitely going to beat Tanahashi here, especially with Ibushi, because Ibushi just signed a full-time contract. And Ibushi was my pick to win this entire thing. So I was like, okay, New Japan, they're not going to push Sabre as like a top star, but they still want him to play the spoiler role, sort of similar to Fale. I've got to give big props to Zack Sabre Jr. for his tournament run thus far because all of his three matches were all very good. I think he actually overall might have the highest like average rating. Like, well, I guess nah, probably Okada, but if I had to say who had the lowest like threshold for a match, Zack Sabre Jr. might be the best winner. Am I making sense? Like his worst match was 3 3/4 stars. I didn't give him anything higher than that. Like all of his matches were very good in my opinion, all 3 3/4 stars. And yeah, I guess if you've been listening to the show and you've listened to my reviews on New Japan, you know that I'm not the biggest Zack Sabre Jr. fan of him personally or of his wrestling style at times. I've been like, oh okay, I don't really like how you go overkill. But yeah, all of his matches have been not the same, but they've followed a formula where it's based on his usual style, but it's more palatable for me. For someone like me who's like, oh, he's doing too much stuff, he's making people look weak. And this was yet another really good match. So at the start, the story was really, Zack Sabre Jr., we all know he beat Tanahashi last year to win the New Japan Cup. So Tanahashi's really got to go out of his way to try prove that he can, outsmart Sabre and actually win, get back his win from last year. And they played upon this idea by Tanahashi actually not only coping with, but actually getting the better of Sabre in some of their grapple exchanges. And I know that's a very common thing in Sabre matches where the story is, oh wow, Sabre is this crazy submission specialist, but his opponent is getting the best of him at, at grappling and submission holds. What? And so I know this isn't something groundbreaking, but I always do really enjoy how committed New Japan is to making Sabre this absolute dominant threat. Even when I don't enjoy his actual in-ring work, it's like with Fale. I still love the role he plays, where it's like he's a guy who's totally different on the roster, and in storyline, you never know if he can just totally upset your favorite dude right then and there. And so I really love this because Tanahashi, and you'd expect this because not only is Tanahashi, wise and intelligent, as the English commentary is always known to tell us, but, you'd expect the sort of, adaptation that we've seen from him as opposed to his match with Sabre last year, where it's like, okay, Tanahashi's been wrestling for 20 years. It makes sense that he's sort of scouted Sabre in this time since he lost to him, and he can actually deal with his moves and out grapple him and use his his veteran instinct, his intelligence, and also his general strength, his 42-year-old whatever strength to actually best this cheeky cocky little 30-year-old guy. So I really enjoyed that, and Sabre was really getting annoyed with Tanahashi. It's like, okay, I beat you last year, but what, now you're actually somehow smarter and wiser? Usually I can just totally take a guy who's twice my weight and just turn them into a fucking pretzel, but how come you, Ace Tanahashi, how come you're putting up such an issue? So I really enjoyed that factor here as well. Of course, there can't be a Zack Sabre Jr. wrestling match without him eventually gaining control, at least for I'd say at least 50% of the match. So that did come out, eventually his submission hold started to wear Tanahashi down. Tanahashi's speed, his intelligence sort of was waning, where it's like, oh, okay, I have no idea what to get out of this submission hold. So then we got to see Tanahashi show off his selling. And look, it's Tanahashi, one of the best in the world, one of the best of all time. His selling was fantastic. He can be a bit melodramatic at times, but it's the sort of melodrama that fits in perfectly with wrestling. It's not like Ospreay where his screaming goes too melodramatic, even though I don't hate it. It can still be a bit annoying. With Tanahashi, it's sort of that nice little medium between, convincing, compelling, and melodrama, where it's like, oh yes, this is the sort of, extravagant, avant-garde, out there art that I love in wrestling. Sorry to be a bit pretentious there. But yeah, it was also great seeing Tanahashi fire up and fight Sabre off, especially when Sabre would get in all of his, his trademark overkill sequences where he applies a bunch, like a million, trillion, holds it consistently, and then Tanahashi sort of manages to escape them after being dominated for ages, gives a great selling performance, and then he's sort of getting more annoyed with Sabre. He's like, okay, you stupid piece of shit. I love how I always do my impressions where it's like, oh, how do I explain what this wrestler was showing me with their body? I'm just going to, play their role and, make up some quote for them. But it was really as if Tanahashi was saying, sort of getting back at Sabre for being able to so easily dominate him. And that sort of would give the rub back to Tanahashi. It was, that was the issue I had with Sabre's matches last year, where with Tanahashi and also more to the extent of Ibushi and Naito, he would totally dominate them with all of his crazy submission holds. And even though they did still get a few hope spots, it never really made them look dominant because they would always look so weak and desperate in them. Whereas here, when Tanahashi would get, his moments where he'd come back against all of Sabre's, overkill stuff, he would look more like aggressive and fierce. And it's like, yes, this is the dude who deserves to win this match and not just by luck. Alongside Sabre's dominance, we also saw that Sabre started working over Tanahashi's arm. We know that Sabre has a ridiculous number of holds. He can work over the neck, the abdomen probably. He can work over, the shoulder, the knee, every damn part of the arm and the leg. And so it made sense that he was working over the arm. But Tanahashi, in turn, he was working over Sabre's leg because obviously, he liked to set up for the Texas Clover hold. That's actually what he used to beat Shota in the first round. So it would make sense that he was also targeting that. So, it's got a bit of dual limb work there. So that was also interesting because, again, it ensured that Sabre couldn't fall into his pattern of being, 100% dominant, 100% total killer and making Tanahashi look weak, because Tanahashi himself was therefore, sort of showing the same submission hold instinct that Sabre was. And I do have to criticize Tanahashi here. I guess first of all, I'll do my usual and I'll criticize Sabre. So Sabre's selling, as opposed to his like real-time selling and his like long-term selling of Tanahashi's work, that itself I thought was very good. Sabre, even though like no matter what he was doing, he was always making sure to show that the leg was, he was suffering from it, it was causing him issues, and it was also affecting his offense, his movement, his speed, it was affecting all of that. So, big props to Sabre for that, but his bumping, which is another very important part of the selling, I thought it was rather bad. I keep thinking, like, it feels like every time I talk about his selling, I always have some sort of like random little analogy I've made up to describe it. And let me just check my notes. What's the one I wrote here? Okay, yeah. So Sabre's selling, it's very weird. It comes off as if his limbs and his spine are constantly fighting each other and trying to escape from one another. And that probably sounds totally absurd to you, but hear me out. Whenever he has to sell like a big power move or like a big strike from Tanahashi, he just collapses in a very weird way. His limbs just don't look to be in tune with his spine, as I said. It's just very jarring. But as I said, his actual real-time and long-term selling of his leg were very good. And Tanahashi, dude, you're one of the greatest of all time. I have to call you out here. You weren't doing the best job of selling your arm here. There were definitely moments where you were using the arm rather freely, despite Sabre targeting it, relatively frequently. So, as much as it pains me to say, Sabre, you did a better job selling over Tanahashi, even though you still have your own selling issues, okay? So I'm proud of you, but I'm not letting you off just this once, You still got to work on that. Sabre continued to be relatively dominant throughout the rest of the second half of the match, but Tanahashi was still getting some really good hope spots where he'd lock in like the Texas Clover hold, or he'd hit some of his twist and shouts or some dragon screw leg whips. So he had a lot of moments where it's like, oh yes, we can rally behind Tanahashi. And even though Tanahashi was getting some convincing hope spots at moments, I was still thinking to myself, you know what? New Japan, they've just put so much effort into building Sabre up as this big spoiler, and he's actually way more over with the fans than fucking Fale, so I can easily see Sabre even making it all the way to the finals. But then, to my fucking shock, but my absolute delight, Tanahashi pinned Sabre. And the story here is, all throughout this tournament, Tanahashi has not gotten to use, I don't think he's even tried to use the high fly flow. His first round, he tapped out Shota with a Texas Clover hold. Then against Taguchi, who's, a junior, not as much power in him, he was able to put him away with the Dragon suplex, which, by the way, I keep calling the Dragon Sleeper in my previous review. Sorry about that. And here, he used Zack Sabre Jr.'s own fucking European clutch pin. I believe that's what it's called. Where, he put, like, their body is in, like, down below them. Like, the opponent's head is basically by his ass. He rolls them back, and then he pins their legs with his legs. And I love that story. The idea just that Tanahashi, even though he's not like a submission specialist like Sabre, he is, he's wise, he's intelligent, he's cunning. He shows the ability to adapt and to learn from his opponents, arsenal, his previous experiences with the opponent. And here, he was able to just, totally sneak out Sabre. And I believe leading up to this, I can't remember exactly. I think it was either Sabre who was attempting his own quick... No, actually, it was Tanahashi who was attempting to steal Sabre's... Oh, God, I'm getting confused. I feel like... Okay, well, I'm just going to say either of these guys was trying to do the sort of sneaky pin attempts that Sabre always does. So it was either Sabre himself running through all of his own cheeky little pin attempts, or it was Tanahashi who was, trying to steal them and then eventually ended up succeeding in stealing them. And yeah, that was a total shock. Like, Tanahashi himself was totally shocked, and Sabre was totally pissed. And obviously, that brings me so much joy as someone who doesn't, I do like Sabre as a wrestler, but he's also he's like a genuine heel to me, where it's like, I don't like this guy. So it's like, oh, one of my favorite wrestlers, he pins, one of my least favorite wrestlers with one of his own finishing moves. Oh, that's so brilliant. And yeah, so this match, I gave this 3 3/4 stars. I already gave away my rating at the start. So yet another very, very good Zack Sabre Jr. match. Another very good performance from Tanahashi, the guy that just doesn't die. He just never, stops being energetic. So what do I actually think of this match and like the actual booking of this match? I guess I'll get into that now. So with all the effort that I've already gone over and over in this review, that New Japan have gone to build up Sabre as this massive threat, we have the best evidence now that what happened with Tanahashi's resurgence at the end of the year, where, he's losing to Okada, but then he's suddenly winning the G1, and then he's won the title, and he's the ace all over again, that was not just a mere B plan to deal with, Omega being like, oh yeah, I'm going to fuck off to America, and I'm going to leave you guys with a lot of storyline ends that aren't finished. That wasn't just New Japan panicking and being like, okay, we're going to go back to the guy who's trusted, who can get the title off of Omega. New Japan genuinely still considers Tanahashi to be a big deal, because this, like, even though it was sort of played off as if Tanahashi was lucky to escape, to get that lucky pin over Sabre, he had a lot of moments of dominance throughout the match. It wasn't like, a total 90-10 match for Sabre where he totally dominated. So yeah, I guess that's at least good, because, being selfish, I'm a fan of Tanahashi. I do want to see him remain in the top, the upper end of the New Japan card. But the decision to build up Sabre as this massive threat and then put over the guy who's already been your ace and who is on the actual downhill in terms of his in-ring ability? Like, that's so confusing, especially because, spoilers, Tanahashi would lose in the semifinals to Sonata, and it's like, okay, well, you guys, if you're going to put Sonata in the finals anyways, you could have given him the massive push, like, the massive rub, I should say, and okay, it's already a bigger rub, I guess, to get a win over Tanahashi, but, you know, with actual, like, you know, current form, it would be way more impressive if he got a win over Sabre, who just tapped out a bunch of guys. Like, Sabre won last year's tournament, as I've already said. I'm going to run over all of his, you know, accolades all over again because it's important. He would have tapped out, or he would have at least beaten, I can't remember how he beat him, but he beat Evil, and then he submitted Ibushi, and then if he beat Tanahashi here, then he would have beaten Tanahashi, and so then, if you had Sabre lose to Sonata, you still get that rub that's equal to Sonata beating Tanahashi, because then Sabre would have beaten Tanahashi. So you see how that works. It's sort of like, I've gone over this. It's like the law of something where it's like, you know, oh, if A beats B and B beats C, then A is better than C, you know? Like, you still could have done that story, and it's just, like, again, I'm selfish, so it's like, oh, yes, you know, Tanahashi, he beat Sabre, but then it's like, okay, if you're going to build up Sonata, why don't you just have him go over Sabre? Like, you're not going to get too many opportunities to bring in a guy who you can build up like Sabre, and you can have them be dominant and convincing and relatively over with the crowd, and actually have like a decent story with them, because then, even though Sabre would have lost to Sonata, you know, Sonata ended up losing in the finals, again, spoilers, so then you could have done a program for the rest of the year that had like a few more matches between Sonata and Sabre, and that would have been like a nice little thing to, you know, keep Sonata, you know, busy while he was sort of trying to find his next sort of direction. So yeah, again, even though I did really enjoy this match and I was stoked with the result, from a storyline perspective and a writing perspective, I was sort of confused why they would throw away all the momentum they had with Sabre just to put over Tanahashi, who doesn't need it, and they could have helped put over Sonata. Look, I'm just gonna be going on and on about it. One last thing. They even could have used it to put over Okada big time, because, you know, Sabre gave Okada a real big run for his money in the finals. No, it wasn't the finals. It was the Sakura Genesis show last year. So even then, you could have had like a great finals match between them. But you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Tanahashi made it through. Sabre's out. All's good in the world. Just before I look at the semi-finals matches, I'll just go over some general notes. I can't remember when these notes, like the actual date that the events took place, but I'll just run through them. So Taichi is going to be challenging Ospreay for the Never title, so that's something I'm very excited for. Sadly, I didn't actually see the match where Ospreay won the Never title off of Taichi that happened like at the end of last year. And I did hear it was, you know, very good, even great, but at the time I can't remember what I was doing. I just wasn't really focusing on New Japan at the end, because it was sort of in that weird period where it's like, oh, the G1's over and the Destruction shows are over, and now we're just waiting for Wrestle Kingdom. So I was sort of like, I'm not going to bother checking this stuff out. And yeah, so look, Taichi, he is in peak form right now. He just had an awesome match against Ishii. I'm really excited to see what he can produce against Ospreay. I think both guys are going to work really hard. That's going to be awesome. So what happened to actually set this up was that Taichi, he laid Ospreay out with a mic stand as Ospreay was trying to save Taguchi from Sabre. And then, you know, it's the usual sort of New Japan thing where there's no official challenge. It's basically just Taichi holds up the title and gloats and stands over Ospreay's body. So, like, we as the fans know, okay, well, in New Japan, this is basically an official contract signing. And then also Kota Ibushi, he basically, I'm not sure if it was official or not, but, you know, according to New Japan's translations and their videos and everything, Ibushi has challenged Naito for the IC title, I believe. Actually, let me check my notes. Yeah, I think this was actually when Ibushi, he went backstage after he had a tag match where he faced off with Naito, and then he said something in the interview where he's like, oh, Naito, you don't treat that title properly. And so, yeah, so it's going to be a challenge. And Ibushi, he was, you know, he had a very famous history with this title, the IC title, because he famously fought Nakamura for the title at Wrestle Kingdom 9. And that's considered one of the matches that, you know, put New Japan in the Western eye. You know, that's one of the matches that people always talk about as being one of the greatest matches ever. And that's one of the first, like, really big matches I watched from New Japan. And that was one of the first matches that made me sit up and say, whoa, this isn't some lame WWE shit. This is like wrestling. This is wrestling as I want to experience it. And Naito, he apparently in his backstage interview, he was very willing, very, very willing to have Ibushi challenge him. And to me, that sort of implied like, oh yeah, Naito, he's trying to play it cool. He's trying to be like, oh yeah, dude, I don't care if you challenge me, I'm going to win. But that's going back to, you know, Naito's character where he acts like he doesn't care, but the truth is he cares beyond belief, because he's probably embarrassed that he lost to this guy in the first round of the tournament. And especially after Naito had already made that comment where he's like, you know, I'm going to challenge for both titles. And then he loses in the first round, you know, that's embarrassing. So he probably wants to face Ibushi right away so he can get his win back. So I really like that. And we think that this match between Ibushi and Naito for the IC title is going to be at MSG. I think that's a bit crazy because then you're going to have a massive heavyweight title match on that show, as well as an IC title match, and not just any IC title match, between Ibushi and Naito, like two of the biggest guys in the company. That seems way overkill. I wouldn't be surprised if, because New Japan's like, oh, we're giving away a heavyweight title match, which is from the winner of the New Japan Cup, we're giving that away in America, then we should, headline a show in Japan with the IC title, because, that's what that title was made for. It's made to be a secondary headlining title. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ibushi and Naito, sometime around MSG, maybe a week or so later in Japan, though. I'm now going to move on to reviewing the March 23rd semi-finals from Nagaoka in Niigata. But first of all, I just have to make one very quick apology. Sorry if you've been listening to this and you've noticed me saying a lot. That's become my crutch phrase for a while because, as you guys know, I get a bit nervous when I record. I was just about to say it then. I try to do like a single cut as much as I can, but I have to do a lot of editing. So yeah, apologies for that. I'm going to try not do it any further. So let's get on to the first of the semifinals. This was between Okada and Ishii. If I can immediately give my thoughts on this match before analysing it, this was the match of the tournament. This was a fantastic match. This is now my new second favourite match of the year. This was outstanding. So, what did I like about this match? Well, first of all, you have to remember there is a lot of history here with Okada versus Ishii. They had a fantastic, fantastic doesn't even do it justice. They had an outstanding near match of the year contender back in 2016 in the G1. It was an amazing match and Ishii got the better of Okada. And that was just after Okada had won back the IWGP heavyweight title from Naito at Dominion. And he'd already lost to, I believe, Fale and Marufuji that year. And then he'd also lost to Ishii. And that was big because Okada faced absolutely everyone possible, essentially, during that massive 700-day reign of his. But Western fans were totally upset because Ishii never got to challenge. And the idea was, hey, Ishii he beat the champion in the G1. Everyone else who did that got a shot. How come Ishii didn't? And the idea was always, it was unspoken. No one ever came out and said this, but we understood that it was like, Ishii is a fellow member of Chaos. And so he is going to be like, I'm not going to challenge my boy. Even though I did beat him in the tournament, I only faced him because that's how New Japan booked it. I'm not going to take his title off him if I don't have to. So that was always the idea. And here, they finally face off again after 3 years. So there was a real possibility that Ishii was actually going to beat Okada here. To me, Okada was the only person who it made sense to win this tournament with Ibushi being out. But I could imagine New Japan sort of being crazy and trying to get this idea over of Ishii being the one guy on Chaos and, maybe the one guy in New Japan who can always have Okada's card. So that was always at the back of my mind during this match, and it played up fantastically because this match ended up being absolutely insane. As soon as this match started, I noticed it was immediately different to all the other matches Okada had thus far in this tournament, because in those matches, Okada was usually being light-hearted, a bit, comical right from the start. Even with Ospreay, who was a fellow Chaos member, Okada clearly didn't consider him on his level. He was, joking out a bit, and it took a while for Okada to actually up his aggression and bring out the intensity, and that was only when Ospreay had forced him to do that. But here, with Okada versus Ishii, he didn't even have to up his aggression because his aggression was pretty much already upped. He didn't do the clean break like he'd been doing with all of his other opponents. He was immediately going for the heelish stuff. I think he was like throwing his heel into Ishii's face, sort of paintbrushing him, I believe they call it, when he's sort of slapping him around. And Ishii, he was like, it's fucking Ishii. He's more than happy to return that level of intensity. And from there, Ishii started unleashing all of his trademark strikes. And unlike in the Yoshi-Hashi match, where his strikes felt a tiny, slight bit weak, at least weaker compared to Yoshi-Hashi's, here, Ishii's strikes were they were fucking beautiful. They were stiff as hell, and Okada did a fantastic job selling. And this is something that I love about Okada. I'll always say this about Okada. When Okada wrestles a strong style match, Okada, because of his pride and because of his determination to be the guy that leads New Japan and is their star, which is his entire character, he will force himself to stand up to these strong stylers. The likes of Shibata, Ibushi, at least, we've seen it with Ibushi in the few interactions they've had, and also, of course, with Ishii. When they let out their stiff strikes, like Okada, he cannot match them in stiff strikes. Okada's strikes are actually one of the few areas in his game that are rather weak. His strikes have always been known to be a bit weak, sort of sloppy offense. So that makes it much more endearing when Okada tries to face off with Ishii in a strike battle like he did here, and it's even more endearing when we see Okada stand up to Ishii's strikes, because we've seen Ishii totally demolish guys who are way bigger and way more durable than Okada. or I guess I shouldn't say way more durable, but they can take a better punishment in the short term. But Okada's strength is that, people like to say it sort of mockingly. They'll say, oh, Okada's Superman. But yeah, his gimmick, his actual story is that he is the guy who never gives up. He's essentially the John Cena, except he can actually wrestle a variety of matches and tell a compelling story. Sorry to throw shade on Cena there. I just think he's a very basic wrestler. But, is there anything really new, like a modern day wrestling fan thinking that Cena is a limited wrestler? I don't think I'm alone there. Anyways, this match ended up being absolutely fucking phenomenal because the story was that Okada was standing up to absolutely everything Ishii threw at the start, even though Okada was, making it very clear, selling like crazy that Ishii was destroying him, and then Okada brings out his own big offense, and then it's Ishii's turn to sell like mad, and Ishii not only sells like mad, but his bumps were fucking fantastic because Okada is way bigger, way more imposing than Ishii. So when Okada would deliver a massive power move or a big strike, Ishii would throw himself across the ring or dump himself on his neck. And just the image of this massive dude like Okada sending this big but, compact short guy like Ishii flipping and turning, it was just a sight to behold. It was fantastic. After getting past the initial phase of Ishii dominating Okada with strikes, and then obviously we saw Okada standing up to Ishii's strikes and surviving all of them and getting his own offense in, Okada started targeting Ishii's neck, and that started when he hit his usual DDT, and Ishii did a fantastic headstand sell of that, and from there Okada was running through most of his signature moves, and as I said, Ishii was just selling fantastically, and this actually turned Ishii pure babyface, because at the start, it was Okada. Okada's selling was world class, as I've said, very sympathetic. Ishii's digging his hand into Okada's chest, upper chest. Okada already had his chest destroyed by Elgin in the first round, and Ishii was reopening all of those scars. I'm pretty sure Okada was bleeding once again here, and even the match with Mikey Nicholls also opened Okada's chest up, so this is the third match where Okada's chest is just being destroyed, but then it's turned on its head and it's Ishii who's playing the babyface, and so that can be jarring at sometimes, but I found it really compelling because it was just telling the story of Okada. He's so dominant, he can survive Ishii's early onslaught, and then he himself delivers the onslaught, although obviously not as in extreme fashion as Ishii does. Ishii eventually started hitting some big power moves, not even big power moves, some massive power moves and some even stiffer strikes, and Okada was selling them all fantastically. Once he initially got over that hump of Ishii destroying her with stiff strikes, he was getting a bit more arrogant, but it wasn't sort of comical arrogant where he's like, haha, I'm so much better than you. It was more like anger and annoyance where it's like, okay, this dude, he's really fucking hurting me, and this makes me just want to hurt him even harder. So that's the arrogance that I love to see from Okada, when it's not so much from a purely ha ha ha, I'm joking, I'm not taking this seriously. It's like, no, and again, I'm doing my impressions of the wrestlers. It's like, no, I'm fucking annoyed. I want to prove myself as being the best. I'm not going to let Ishii fucking destroy me. So I love that. I was so invested in this match. The big move trading sequences started coming out, and we've got a lot of creativity from all the exchanges. We've got counters on counters on counters on counters. And if you're paying attention, that's one more on counters than we're used to seeing. I especially loved Ishii headbutting Okada and then hitting a short arm lariat as a counter to the Rainmaker. I wasn't expecting that especially because Okada, when he gets the short arm lariat or the Rainmaker itself countered, it's usually by someone who's of an equivalent height. But Ishii, he's only 5'8", I think, to Okada's 6'3", so it was sort of not comical, but it was just a very interesting visual to see the small guy, the small, compact, stiff guy, just totally destroy Okada with a rising uppercut or a lariat. It just looked fantastic. We're of course getting some fantastic trademark Okada crazy late kickouts, just like we were getting in the Ospreay match, except here they were way more dramatic. They were still 2.99 kickouts, but the atmosphere was way higher because the great in-ring action was lasting way longer than in the Ospreay match. Ishii was desperate to win, and Okada was just desperate to survive. This is when Okada's selling was at peak. He looked totally... If you've heard me describe Okada's selling in these moments before, you know what I'm going to say. He looked distraught. He looked shocked. He was like, my entire life is going to end. It's going to be over if I lose this one match. And again, that's just what makes him so fucking compelling. But at the same time, Ishii is so damn compelling because he's doing his absolute best to take out the Superman, to finally destroy Okada. He's throwing every big power move and strike, every damn lariat he can, but Okada just keeps surviving it. It's just a fucking rush. It's just an amazing match. Another amazing moment was when Okada hit a freakishly high-angled German suplex, which I was shocked by. I was like, okay, Ishii, the joke is ha ha ha, he doesn't have a neck. How the fuck does he have a neck after that goddamn German suplex? But then, Ishii, he hit a judo throw, so this was his second counter to the Rainmaker. He hit a judo, sort of hip toss, which is a rather creative little moment there. And then he transitioned that right into an armbar, and that was a genuinely convincing moment. People on like subreddits, they're sort of half joking saying Okada tapped out, but that's just because Okada, when he actually teases a submission, when he's flapping and throwing his hand around, he does a fantastic job of showing, like, the idea is that part of Okada's body wants to tap out. That's why his hand is flapping around as if it's about to tap his opponent or his own body or the mat to signal his actual submission tap out. But at the same time, he doesn't want to actually he's trying to control his body. He's trying to control himself so he himself doesn't tap out. That's why his hand itself is flailing around, but it's never actually tapping anything or contacting anything to actually signal the tap out. So Okada's selling of the armbar with his hand flailing around was incredibly convincing. The fact that it also came off of a counter to Okada's finishing move made it seem like, okay, this is a random move for Ishii to pull out an armbar of all things, but this could potentially be a finish to the match right then and there. So yeah, Okada's selling was fantastic. The fire and the energy with which Ishii executed the judo hip toss or whatever it was counter and then applied the armbar was fantastic, but eventually, luckily, Okada did reach the ropes and the match continued. And I have to think, was this meant to be a callback to how Okada, I think his only other submission loss in New Japan, at least since he actually joined the main roster, was to Nakamura in the 2015 G1 Climax semifinal, and that was against a fellow Chaos member just like Ishii. So I was wondering, is that either Ishii or I guess New Japan itself trying to link back to maybe the only person who can actually submit Okada or possibly even defeat him is one of his fellow Chaos boys? So that was another moment where that sort of made that entire submission sequence very convincing, because to me, I was immediately thinking of Nakamura's armbar, which was also a counter to Okada's Rainmaker back in the 2015 match. And here it had to go through the judo hip toss or whatever from Ishii, so it wasn't as direct as then, but we still ended up with a counter to the Rainmaker, which ended up with an armbar. So I was thinking, okay, shit, Ishii might get the upset right then and there, just like Nakamura back in 2015. After that fantastic submission sequence, which I probably just spent too much time focusing on, Ishii then started targeting Okada's arm. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, are we going to get a bit of late action in the limb work game? And we didn't end up having that, but it was a nice little moment right then because it made sense. Ishii, he got very close to submitting Okada there, and Okada, having the height advantage, he managed to get his foot to the ropes, but it would make sense for Ishii to then immediately start targeting the arm. But luckily, Okada, even though he was weakened in that one moment, he very quickly regained control, and this was when Ishii was at his peak at bumping. Okada was bringing out his bigger power moves, his bigger strikes, and Ishii was just on a mission to totally sell them like crazy, and, he succeeded in that mission. Ishii was then massively firing up, desperate to put Okada away with just one final big move, but Okada just continued surviving absolutely everything. And we got a beautiful no-sell moment from Okada in response to Ishii's own attempted Rainmaker. So Ishii had already hit the short arm lariat, and then he attempted another one. And obviously, the short arm lariat, when Okada does it, you may as well just, for shorthand, you may as well just call it the Rainmaker. So Ishii went for that, but this time, Okada no-sold it as opposed to being knocked down by it. And this was a reference to earlier in the match, when Okada similarly went for his short arm lariat Rainmaker, like the mini Rainmaker, I guess, or a semi or semi Rainmaker, and Ishii similarly no-sold it back then. So this was Okada getting the same moment, and that was cool because it was a finisher steal, or I guess a signature move steal, but the rub came off with Okada still, because even though his move was stolen, he was the one that came out dominant. It was almost as if, the move being used against him, he's such a boss that after all this fighting, all this show of endurance from him, at the end of the match, Ishii was desperate. He had to use Okada's own move, but at that moment, Okada had fought so hard that even his own move could not take him out. And that was fantastic. We then got a tombstone, a revolution tombstone to be precise, and then a Rainmaker. And yeah, Okada got the win, finishing this absolutely outstanding match. I love this. I went 4.25 stars to about 4.5 stars. Yeah, this was fantastic. This outplaces Ospreay versus Jay White from the anniversary show as being my second match of the year. My number one match is still Tanahashi versus Omega from Wrestle Kingdom 13. Yeah, I love this match. This was the absolute best match of the tournament. Nothing has come close. I thought Okada and Ospreay was the standout match of the tournament at the time, and it was at the time, but this absolutely blows that away. I'll now look at our second and final semi-final. This was between Hiroshi Tanahashi and Sanada. So first of all, my pre-match thoughts. Sanada was the clear fan favorite here. And at first I was like, oh wow, this is cool. People have seen that Sanada's made it all the way to the semifinals and now they're really getting behind him. But then it turned out he was actually just in his hometown. And I say he was just in his hometown because if this was like a random little town, like if this was in Tokyo or Osaka and, one of the major towns and he was getting this sort of support, then that would be a great sign where, okay, New Japan should probably invest in this guy because he's really getting the crowd invested in him. He could be the next big star. So yeah, I guess this is a great sign. He's got great support in his hometown, but it doesn't really show too much about his actual potential to be a star in, I guess, the future. So as a result of the strong hometown crowd support for Sanada, Tanahashi was actually becoming a bit of a heel. At first, they were both sort of, posturing, both guys going to the ropes, trying to get more support from the crowd. And Tanahashi, he was really obviously irked by the fact that Sanada, this guy he's not even one of the top 4 guys in the company. Why is he getting more cheers than me, the guy who's held this company on my back for so many years? So that was fun, and this ended up affecting the actual structure of the match because, as I said, Tanahashi, he realized he would have to be the heel, and he sort of seemed to, I guess, accept that rather happily. He was like, okay, you guys aren't going to support me? Fine, I don't care. I'm going to do my best to win this match. So that was an interesting little concept there for the match. The support that Sanada was getting from this hometown crowd was so overwhelming that even I found myself saying, I'm actually going to have to cheer for Sanada here, because Tanahashi, even though he's one of my favorites of all time, the atmosphere with Sanada is just too perfect. He needs to win this match. But at the same time, I was just thinking to myself, they've invested so much in Tanahashi all over these years, and he just put away Sabre, who they were building up as this massive spoiler, for the last year or so. So I was thinking Tanahashi is probably going to get the win here. And one of the reasons I also thought that was because on English commentary, this was when I first realized that they pointed out how Tanahashi, in all of his matches thus far in the tournament, he hadn't yet used the high fly flow. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, that's a clear story that they're doing here. They're probably going to have this payoff in the final when he either goes for the high fly flow and hits it and wins, if they're going to do a Tanahashi victory, or he tries to finally hit the high fly flow and he hits it but it still fails, or he still can't hit it, and that's what leads to his failure in the finals. The match itself started with a lot of grapple exchanges, and both guys were still continuing to have a bit of a popularity contest where they're both trying to appeal to the crowd and posture, and Sanada was still coming out on top, and this is when Tanahashi was first realizing he had to basically just go full heel. Sanada, he would stand out whenever he had an energetic flurry attack, so that was usually a nice little change up from the rather basic and laid-back grapple exchanges we were getting. It was fun watching Tanahashi, as he accepted he had to play the heel here. He started working over Sanada's legs, which obviously would play into the idea of Sanada being the hometown hero, and then he's having this uphill battle against Tanahashi, one of the greatest of all time, who has, a signature move that targets the legs with the Texas Clover hold. And I thought Sanada was doing a great job selling the legs, and so I was really invested in that story there. Both guys started bringing out, I guess you'd call them medium-sized big power moves, and then they rather quickly moved into teasing a finish as Sanada locked on the Dragon Sleeper, and then he hit a Muto moonsault on Tanahashi's back. But then he went for a second Muto moonsault to target the actual front, the abdomen of Tanahashi, and that's another thing that New Japan likes to do. If there's like an aerial move, they'll sometimes hit it to the back of the opponent, but the idea is that because they're not connecting with the actual front of the opponent, where they can, I guess the kayfabe idea is when that happens, they can better knock the air out of them, and win them. If you don't have that, then the attack to the back doesn't do as much damage. So again, Sanada, he went for the second Muto moonsault, but Tanahashi, he got his knees up and he managed to counter it. So then we had Tanahashi, he was attempting a few like quick cradle and roll up pin attempts, and this was referencing how he similarly beat Sabre with a flash pin, a quick little speedy flash pin from the night before. So even though it seemed like this reference was a bit too on the nose, it's like, oh yeah, we know that Tanahashi, you're just doing a reference here to your previous match. You're probably not going to win the match this way. I still had to think to myself, look, we have still seen he can win a match this way. So at the end of the day, what is the reason why he couldn't win a match exactly in the same way with a cute roll-up? As we were seeing these flash pins come out, both guys actually started trading some quick European clutch holds, and I thought they were a bit slow at executing them, but it was still a fun idea, playing off of how obviously Tanahashi beat Sabre with his own European clutch in the previous match. And I believe Sabre has actually lost to Sanada as well when Sanada stole the flash pin last year in the G1. I feel like that happened, because I remember that Sabre and Sanada had a really great match last year in the G1, way better than their match in the previous New Japan Cup as well, and I feel like that's how Sanada won. I feel like he likewise stole the European clutch. Anyways, during this moment, well, I guess after this moment actually, Sanada, he actually locked on the Dragon Sleeper again, and it was another really convincing sequence where it was like, okay, wow, Tanahashi, I could really believe he might actually tap out here, and I didn't think he would, but holy shit, Tanahashi tapped out right then and there, and it was a rather quick tap out, just as when Sanada faced off with Cabana in the quarterfinals. And yeah, I was really shocked to see Sanada actually get the win here. I was really thinking, okay, they're giving Sanada a nice little push here, but he's probably going to lose to the ace, to Tanahashi, who's not really the ace, but we like to say he's the ace. But no, Sanada got the win here, and he was making his way to the finals. So I guess I'll just go over my thoughts on this booking, because I have some very mixed feelings here. First of all, as soon as I saw that it wasn't going to be Tanahashi versus Okada in the finals, and it was in fact going to be Okada versus Sonata, to me that really solidified the fact that Okada's definitely winning the tournament and challenging Jay at MSG. I couldn't really imagine New Japan suddenly pushing Sonata. Like, that would have been awesome if they were going to prolong the story of Okada's revival and keep him away from the title scene, plus establish a new star, or at least a budding new star in Sonata. I would have been all for that, even if I would have still been annoyed by the fact that there would be zero actual story and setup for a match between Jay and Sonata. And I understand sometimes when we're watching wrestling, we do want it to reflect real life. So, real life doesn't have these tailor-made, picture-perfect stories. So do I really need there to be an already established long-time feud between Jay and Sonata? No, I don't need that, but it would have been nice if there was just something, like some bit of history between them. Maybe they had like a bit of a feud last year or something. I would have just liked that extra detail. Another issue I have is one I've already made, so you'll be well aware of this. My issue with how it was Tanahashi who beat Sabre, who was the one who, got rid of the spoiler, but then Tanahashi himself loses to Sonata. And I've already made my point, so I'll just be brief again. You still could have given Sonata I'd say an even bigger rub than he got here from directly beating Tanahashi, if he in fact beat Sabre, who had already beaten Tanahashi. But yeah, I'm not going to, labor the point on that. At the end of the day, despite these issues, it was still cool to see Sonata get the win here, especially in his hometown crowd and over such an established star in the company. And I am still very, very happy if this is just the start of Sonata slowly becoming like one of the next big stars in the company. I don't think he's championship material just yet, but I think, in 2 years' time, he may be at that point, because we see a lot of great fundamentals in him. He's just missing a bit of that connection with the crowd. As I've said before, he's a bit difficult to connect with and sympathize with, but I do think he's getting there. And so I was really excited going into the finals with him against Okada. Just for the match itself, Sonata versus Tanahashi, I gave this 3.5 stars. I thought it was a bit awkward and slow at points, but I did really enjoy a lot of their interactions, and I love the story of Tanahashi being, the established guy, and Sonata's coming out of the woodworks. He's actually able to put away this guy, this massive star, in his own hometown with the crowd just roaring with him. Yeah, I don't think this is their best match. They've definitely had a lot of other matches, specifically in, I think, 2016 and 2017. I feel like they had G1 matches in both those years, and I feel like those were way better. Tanahashi was also a bit more mobile then, and the story wasn't, well, I guess the structure wasn't as set as it was here, where Tanahashi was playing up the heel and Sonata was the pure babyface. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's still a good match, not a total blowaway semi-final, absolutely nowhere near as good, or I should say nowhere near as phenomenal as Okada versus Ishii, but still a good semi-final. We've finally made it through to the finals, so this is from March 24th, from Nagaoka in Honshu. I actually believe that the show the previous night was also in Nagaoka, but then it said Nagaoka in Shizuoka, so, I'm not some Japanese geographical genius, so I have no idea what these mean, but I'm just saying, guys, this was the city. It was Nagaoka in Honshu, and so yeah, these are the finals. I didn't watch, well, I should say I did watch all of the undercard matches, but I was only paying half attention because I was sort of just getting really hyped up for the finals, so I wasn't, I didn't have my notepad open on one side of my screen while watching the other match and making diligent notes. I was just watching everything, and I did think we had quite a few interesting little moments. There were some fun interactions between the match, well, it was the match of, I believe it was Naito and Shingo versus, I believe, Ibushi and Narita. The few little moments I saw from that were very good. Pretty much all the undercard matches were very solid. That's a common thing in New Japan when there's like a big blow-off for a tournament or a really big show. Usually all the wrestlers on the show will work hard because they all realize, even if they're not in a prominent position, their company is still putting on a big show, and so they themselves have to look good. I also think back to the anniversary show that we got at the start of March, where it wasn't like a big show, but every single match on that card was at least rather good at worst, and every single guy worked really hard. So yeah, the undercard was fine. The only other match apart from the finals that is worth talking about is the US title match between Juice Robinson and Chase Owens. So yeah, I guess I'll get into that. And guys, it's not looking good. These two had a pretty decent match in the first round of the New Japan Cup. I was expecting Juice to establish himself as being a serious contender in the New Japan roster by getting a win over Chase Owens, who's a rather, small little sort of runt guy in the roster that can make you look good. But in a rather shock result, Chase Owens got the win over Juice and he challenged for the US title. And instead of saving the match for MSG, which is what I figured they'd do, because I figured New Japan would be like, hey, two Gaijin guys, let's put them on our show in a Gaijin country, that'll be cool. But no, for some reason they decided to push it up to the final show. And I guess with the way this match went, I'm glad they did that, because if this was in front of the MSG crowd, this would have been totally embarrassing. So what were my exact issues with this match here? First of all, I just have to say, I'm not actually the biggest fan of both guys, and if you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll be really surprised because I've actually been singing Chase Owens' praise for quite a while, being like, wow, he lights up the undercard matches, and we're finally seeing him show that he can be a decent wrestler in some good singles matches as well in this tournament. But I guess I've realized that his ceiling, even though he does stand out in those opening matches, his ceiling is still pretty much like mid card at best. He has some unique flair to his moves, but when he has to go up against like a really big wrestler or when he tries to have a really serious match, he really can't capture that atmosphere that other guys can. Even like the upper mid card guys such as Yoshi-Hashi. I thought both guys were pretty much on the same level, but Chase Owens has never produced a single match of the caliber that Yoshi-Hashi has produced with, say, Ibushi last year or Ishii this year. So yeah, I guess I was sort of disappointed because this match made me realize, wow, Chase Owens isn't as great as I hoped he would be once he finally got the push. And with Juice Robinson, I actually haven't been the biggest fan of him for about 2 years now. I was really into him when he first came in and he was really weird, like this really weird NXT-based guy with the NXT style, and then he slowly worked his way up the ladder and started getting title matches. I was really into him then, but ever since he actually started getting a serious push, and alongside his rather well, not just rather, but his absolutely terrible booking this last year, I've been less invested in him, and I also think that his in-ring work itself hasn't been as interesting as it was in his first few years in the company. So I already had that bit of a bias there, and the rest of the match just made everything absolutely way worse. So the match started off and Chase was in control. He applied a beatdown for, I'd say, the first 5 opening minutes or so, and I wasn't super interested in it. He was making sure to target Juice's abdomen with a variety of strikes and holds, but again, nothing he was doing was super compelling. Juice started getting a bit of momentum, but Chase and Jado, who was on the outside, they started to bring out all the heel spots, and this was when the match went from just being outright dull to just being annoying. It was all the damn heel spots, and they weren't just there, they were scattered all throughout this damn match. So Juice started becoming a bit more aggressive and heelish himself as he was trying to fight back against all of Chase and the other Bullet Club's shenanigans, and I was a bit more interested there, but there's just something about Juice where when he fires up, it feels disingenuous or ingenuous. It feels fake, it feels like he's a guy who's playing a wrestler who's getting fired up, as opposed to a guy who's just genuinely getting fired up. He sort of hams it up a bit too much, he comes off as a bit too cheesy. Juice likewise began targeting Chase's back, or I guess his abdomen, and at that point I thought that was going to become the main focus of the story, was going to be Chase targeting Juice's back or abdomen and Juice doing the same to him, and I was thinking, okay, this could be a nice little moment there, but then the match went back to Chase going for his strikes, and again, he still has nice flair to them, but his technique was a bit sloppy. He comes off as a guy who's a bit too choreographed. He wouldn't fit along the likes of, say, Ibushi or Ishii, for example, and then to make things worse, the match just went back to all the Bullet Club bullshit with all the interference. It was really wearing me down. Even though I'm still not the biggest fan of Juice Robinson right now, I was still impressed with what he was trying to do with the match to make it worthwhile. He got a few cool spots such as a top rope brainbuster, a jackhammer, and I think a few other moves, and then he actually managed to tap Chase out as he applied a high angle Boston Crab, which was interesting, but of course it's a Bullet Club match, so it couldn't be that simple. Jado was distracting Red Shoes at the same time, and so Chase kicked Juice into Red Shoes, and then we got a classic ref bump. So yeah, Juice got screwed at that moment, and that was the first indication where I was like, okay, even though I'm not enjoying this match, maybe we will get some interesting drama where Chase will actually end up stealing the title, well, cheating to get the title off of Juice. Sadly, the interference spots didn't stop there. Jado once again got in the ring, but this time Juice was meant to have this really big heroic moment where he finally stands up to Jado and he puts him in his place. But instead it was just really awkward because Juice was he was just waiting for Jado to turn around and face him, I believe, and Jado was just so damn slow. And then there was this incredibly drawn out sequence where Juice is basically attacking Jado and using his kendo stick against him, and then he has to break the kendo stick in half, and the crowd basically went totally silent at this moment. It was just incredibly awkward. I was getting secondhand cringe from watching this. It was meant to be a moment where Juice looks, absolutely dominant. He's staging his comeback, but he, as I've said before, he's just very cheesy. He hams it up. He plays a guy who's an energetic wrestler as opposed to just being an energetic wrestler. And yeah, this was like the worst moment in the match, I'd have to say. We got another really bad interference spot as then Chase, who had been over on the apron, someone had given him some powder, and then he hurled that in Juice's face, but it barely connected with Juice's face at all. Like, Juice's face turned around to face the camera, and maybe some of it got on his shoulder or something, or his chin, but Juice had to cover up his face as if he'd been totally blinded, and to all of us at home and on that side of the stadium, we could see, yeah, Juice is totally fine, so that was another little awkward moment there. Chase then went for his package pile driver, but because of the work done to his back earlier on, he couldn't manage to lift Juice up for it, so there was a nice bit of continuity there. We then got some more basic wrestling exchanges, if I'm remembering correctly, and at that moment I was thinking, okay, the match has been bad at times, but I think it's winning me over at that point. But sadly that would not be the case as we then got further Bullet Club interference. Jado pulled Red Shoes out of the ring as he was trying to counter pinfall for Juice, and then Fale interfered as well, and there was another annoying botch interference spot where the idea is that Chase is meant to try attack Juice with the US title while Fale is holding him, and Juice is meant to get out of the way, and then, oh no, Chase is accidentally, engaged in friendly fire and knocked Fale out. But the execution of that spot was terrible. The US title was meant to connect with Fale's head. It clearly did not connect. Fale just had to sort of like randomly start stumbling around and then exit out of the ring or fall off the apron from wherever he was, and then Juice Robinson basically just fired up. I'm not sure why I just randomly called him formerly Juice Robinson there, but then Juice Robinson fired up, and he took out all the other remaining Bullet Club members who were interfering, and then he put Chase away with the Pulp Friction, which he'd been trying to hit all match long. And yeah, so Juice retains the title over Chase in I just have to say it, in a bad match. This was a bad match. I only gave this 2.25 stars. For being the only other relatively important match on the show, this was mega disappointing. I continue to be unimpressed with Juice Robinson. I haven't been impressed with him maybe since the start of 2018. Chase, he was winning me over for a while, but I think from his few appearances in his singles matches in this tournament, I've seen, okay, he's definitely got a ceiling. He's not going to be like the next big mid-card killer, but he's decent at times, but he definitely needs to work on his skills before he gets back into a title picture. In the post-match, we saw Fale continue to attack Juice, so I guess this is basically implying that Fale is going to be the next guy to challenge for Juice's US title, but then Mikey Nicholls, the new addition to the New Japan roster, as well as Chaos, he made the save, and I was half expecting him to suddenly turn on Juice, be like, oh yeah, I'm making the save for you. No, I'm not, dude. I'm going to establish myself in this company by just immediately turning heel. But that wasn't the case. I have no idea if there's actually history between these two. They may have been in NXT at the same time, maybe. Who knows? I did find this really weird why a guy from Chaos would go and help someone who isn't really in a unit. I guess you could say Juice is in Taguchi Japan, but we know that's not an official unit. So yeah, but at the end of the day, I can't really complain about this because at least they're doing something with Mikey Nicholls. He's not just going to waste away in Chaos after an incredibly dull performance, an incredibly dull showing in the New Japan Cup. So yeah, not the best idea, but at least it's an idea. One last thing to talk about before I finally get to the New Japan Cup final was the return of Shibata. I don't believe we've actually seen him in a New Japan ring since the G1 finals in 2017. He made a very dramatic return here. He walked in from the the side of the stadium through the crowd. The crowd very slowly realized, holy shit, it's Shibata, and he got a great round of applause, and then he ended up going on commentary. So I fucking love Shibata. He is one of my favorite all time. Like, he might be just behind Okada as being one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, even above Tanahashi, I'd have to say, above Tanahashi and Naito, I think. And so this was a very not emotional, but this was a really heavy moment for me where it's like, damn, I really hope he's going to make an announcement. But the fact that he went back onto commentary, that sort of, I guess, makes me sort of deflated, where it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to have to be resigned to the fact that he's probably not going to wrestle again, and maybe this is just New Japan testing him out in another role which ex-wrestlers have been known to do when they still want to remain in the wrestling business. So look, if he remains with New Japan and we just have to settle for him being on the screen and in our ears doing the audio, then I can't really complain about that. At least the guy's alive, with everything he went through. But God, part of me still wishes to see him return to the ring one day. He was one of the best wrestlers ever. There was so much emotion and passion in his performances. His character was awesome. There was absolutely no one like Shibata. Even the people who he had stiff strike battles with, that was his style, like Ishii and Goto, they were nowhere, their styles, even though they were similar, they were still very unique, and Shibata was just the greatest of all of them. God, I'm just getting into a rant here, but yeah, I fucking love Shibata. I pray he can one day return to the ring. It would be amazing. I swear to God, they would sell so many tickets if Shibata finally returned. But yeah, I'm just rambling right now. Let's get on to the finals. So this was the 2019 New Japan Cup finals between Kazuchika Okada and Sanada. Now, I've just got to say, as much as I love Okada and as much as I really want Sanada to become the next big guy in the company so that I can likewise love him, this match, and look, it was great, but the first half of this was incredibly fucking boring. We got the usual 50-50 grapple exchanges for way too long. There are still a few fun moments, also some fun individual spots or some moments of character work from both guys. But yeah, this opening sequence just lasted way too long. They were in first gear for far too long, and I was really finding myself, it didn't help that I was sleepy at the time because, these shows are rather late in New Zealand time, but I was also just finding myself totally bored, being like, maybe I should open up my browser on this other window, let me, go on Twitter, let me see what's happening. Being that we were still in Sonata's hometown, he was obviously still a rather strong babyface there. Although Okada was still getting a noticeable amount of support, I'd probably say maybe the crowd was like 60 or 70% Sonata and the rest Okada, so 40 or 30% Okada. So that was good. And Okada was definitely playing that up as he was a guy that was firmly in control. This was when we were seeing, as opposed to the Okada, who's immediately aggressive, immediately is aware of the threat that someone poses, such as he was with Ishii. Here, who's sort of back to the approach he has when he's facing off with like Mikey Nichols or Ospreay, where he's taking it a bit less seriously and he's more calm and collected, where he's sort of moving through the motions purposefully. Not as in he's not showing emotion, but the idea is that he's trying to get across the idea of how he's so great, he's so, awesome at wrestling that he barely has to break a sweat or even look like he's struggling at all. And that really helped put Sonata over as a really big babyface. And this lasted for a surprisingly long time. And that was when I was first finding a little thing to get interested, to get invested in this match with, because I was thinking to myself, okay, is Okada going to dominate the first half of this match, maybe even the first 3 quarters of the match, and then Sonata's going to stage a massive comeback in the last quarter and he's going to pull out a win? Because it seemed a bit too robotic for Okada to just be in control. And I was thinking, yeah, even though I went into this match expecting that Okada's totally going to win and challenge Jay, maybe they're going to continue the story of Okada. Every time he gets to the top, or at least near to the top, he gets, the rug pulled out from under him. Just like how we thought the Rainmaker was finally back at Wrestle Kingdom, no, JY entered that. And so I was thinking, maybe we're going to have another case here. Sonata would finally liven up the match as he gained some momentum, a bit of control, and he started hitting his, signature moves as he's then jumping and flying around the ring. But the match was sadly still in first gear at that moment, even with those few fun flashes we were getting. And I was certain the match was going to go at least 30 minutes by just how long they were actually taking for the match to get interesting. And the match did end up going 33 minutes, so I was correct there. I don't think this is the best way to do these sort of matches, but hey, that's New Japan. They have a certain style. And Okada, he was soon back in control, and then he was running through all of his own signature moves, and he was playing up his arrogant heel side, with some cheeky smiles and general showboating. And that was another thing where it's like, okay, even though this match is a bit dull, there are a lot of things that I can still enjoy, a lot of the small details. And you know me, I'm a fucking sucker for Okada playing heel, especially when he's against a budding babyface star such as Sonata, who's in his own hometown. So that was another thing that was sort of, keeping me at bay, where it's like, I'm not enjoying this match too much, but there are these little things that I can enjoy that can still get me invested. The big breakaway from the rather monotonous first half started when Sonata managed to counter Okada's tombstone into his own tombstone, and then Sonata started hitting his own series of big power moves, and at that moment the direction of the match had totally changed 180 from 10 minutes earlier. We were finally getting some really interesting creative exchanges, and I was just thinking to myself, holy shit, fucking finally. Being that Okada had still dominated the majority of the match up until that point, those moves that Sonata was finally pulling out weren't enough to immediately put Okada away, obviously. So Okada did regain some control, and then he was trading his own big moves with Sonata. And then he surprisingly started bringing out his short-arm lariat Rainmaker and the tombstone itself, which I found to be a bit early in the match, because at that point we'd had maybe 10 or 15 minutes of a rather dull opening phase, and then only 5 minutes or so of the, quote-unquote big move exchanges. So I was thinking to myself, wow, they're really going to start teasing the finish rather early, aren't they? Of course, the match did not end there, as even though Okada hit the tombstone, Sonata continued to fight. He actually managed to, no-sell the tombstone, and that was really jarring for me, because all throughout the tournament, that tombstone has usually always been the move that has set up Okada's winning Rainmakers. He's usually always targeted his opponent's neck, and that's prepared then for the tombstone, which totally obliterates the neck, and then he just hits the Rainmaker, 1, 2, 3, gets the win. So that did sort of irk me there. At the end of the day, I was still glad the match was continuing, and that we're going to see a bit more fight from Sonata in this big moment of his. Sonata eventually managed to lock in the Dragon Sleeper with his legs wrapped all the way around, and even though this was another situation where I'm like, this is a bit too on the nose, I know this is trying to reference the match with Tanahashi, so therefore this is probably not how the match is going to end. Okada is just such a fantastic, fucking phenomenal seller that he had me believing that the match could end right there. He was doing the similar sort of thing he did with Ishii, where he's flailing his hand around, and it's like, oh, is he actually going to tap the mat or his opponent or himself to signify that he's giving up, or is he actually just in pain and his body is just writhing in, agony? So I found that really convincing, and what helped was that Okada was in the middle of the ring, and it didn't look like he was anywhere near the ropes, and the sequence itself, the Dragon Sleeper sequence, lasted so long that with every 5-second period, I was thinking to myself, okay, it's becoming a bit more believable, and now it's even more believable now, and it's even more believable now. And so I was really invested at that moment. Look, someone needs to talk to Sonata about his strategy of when he's basically sent someone unconscious with his Dragon Sleeper. He then abandons it and he goes for the Muto Moonsault. And okay, it's a very flashy way to win the match, and I understand you're trying to move away from your less interesting, less entertaining finisher of the Dragon Sleeper to a high aerial based move like the Muto Moonsault, which also gives, I guess, praise to your trainer Muto. But at the end of the day, in kayfabe, you should just want to go for the win. You should keep that Dragon Sleeper on until Red Shoes basically says, okay, yeah, this guy's out, he can't continue, match is over, you win. So that's just a little issue I have, but I guess that's an issue with wrestling in general, isn't it? When things don't perfectly align, where a wrestler should take these rational actions to achieve his desired end of winning the match, but for some story-based reasons he doesn't. It was silly, but, I can't really complain about that too much. Sanada missed his Muto Moonsault, and from there the match just continued going with the typical New Japan big finishing stretch, and I was loving it, even though I was still really annoyed that the first half, or maybe even the first 2/3 of the match were rather dull. Those guys were more than making up for it at this point. It was fantastic. All the exchanges were super dramatic at this point. The chemistry was I'd say basically perfect. Okada was selling incredibly hard to put Sanada's offense over. He had his trademark looks of shock and total fear, and Sanada, on the other hand, was looking totally determined. He was sort of like Ishii in the match with Okada from the semi-final, where Sanada, in Ishii's role, he was just looking totally distraught that he couldn't put Okada away, but he wasn't going to let that affect him. He was still really trying to dig deep so he could find something that he could somehow use to put Okada away. And yeah, even though we had all those issues in the match leading up, at the end of it, I was still super invested, and I was desperate for my boy Okada, my one true golden boy, my only true boy. I was desperate for him to pull out the win here. Another cool little creative moment was when Okada, he actually stole the sort of rope run-up moonsault thing that Sanada does when he's grabbing an opponent and he tries to get into the Dragon Sleeper position. So Okada did that, but instead, because obviously Okada doesn't use the Dragon Sleeper, he used it to get into the Tombstone setup position. And then he hit the Tombstone, and it was another, very good Tombstone, and once again, for some jarring reason, Sanada chose to basically no-sell the move. And he no-sold it a bit too freely as well. He basically was down for 2 seconds. Okada tried to get him up for the Rainmaker, I believe, and then Sanada was basically running around rather easily. He was able to evade the Rainmaker, and I guess you can excuse this as being adrenaline, but I would still have liked to have seen Sanada really struggling to avoid the Rainmaker if he did still have to try avoid it at all. Sanada was doing his best to survive, but at the end of the day, he couldn't stop the Okada train just running wild on him. Okada hit the Rainmaker that had been trying to hit all match long, and yeah, Okada wins his first New Japan Cup since, I believe, 2013. So his second New Japan Cup overall. The match itself, I've already been going on about it for 10 or 15 minutes or whatever. So yeah, I have to say this is a very mixed match, but it was still great at the end. And this is a criticism that a lot of people like to make about the New Japan main event. They'll say the match, the first half or even the first 2/3 are really dull, and then the line is always, oh, it's only the final 10 minutes that are good. And I will say, I understand why people say that, but this match is a real outlier, because I think a lot of New Japan's big matches, especially the ones where they have a quote-unquote slow opening phase or whatever, or a slow/dull first half, I think those are dull. No, I shouldn't say it. They are slow by intention, and I don't think they're dull because they usually have a lot of individually cool spots, and they have a lot of interesting character work moments that really lure you into the match, and then it's a big payoff once the big stuff finally starts coming out. So I didn't think this match was a very usual New Japan big match. I think Okada has had a bunch of matches which follow the formula of slow first half and then killer second half, but the first half has usually always been very interesting, at least if you're not someone who's just demanding a spot fest or guys just go out and strike each other in the face for 20 minutes. So I've usually been easily able to invest myself in Okada matches that start off slow, but for some reason here, I don't know if it was an issue with Okada or Sanada himself, or maybe just both guys. Yeah, I just wasn't super invested in this, but it still ended up being great. I'm going to go 4 stars on this. I may have gone lower, but I think the drama in the final few minutes, and especially the crazy chemistry and the interesting exchanges and the creativity that both guys were showing off, I thought it was just too great to really complain about too much to rate this match any lower than 4 stars. This was actually very similar to the heavyweight title match between Okada and Sanada from the start of 2018, which I similarly felt started off very slow and was probably too slow for too long, but then had a very, very fun final 10 minutes and especially a very fun finishing stretch. So maybe it's just something about the way these guys work together. You can't say it's an issue with Okada because, I mean, dude, It's 2019. Okada has had fantastic match after fantastic match with absolutely everyone under the sun. So you can't really start complaining about Okada being the issue here. And Sanada himself, he's obviously not like nowhere near on Okada's level, but he's had plenty of very good and even great matches himself. So maybe it's just something about the way they work together. You know, some wrestlers just don't have the best of chemistry. Like think about Suzuki and Naito. Like this match was way better than anything Suzuki and Naito have had, at least from what I've seen of the last like 3 or so years. I think they may have had a match in 2014 or 2013, which I think people have said is great, but I haven't seen that. But, you know, some people just don't work that well together. And I think we found Okada and Sanada, maybe they're not going to be the best potential set of rivals, so maybe that sort of hampers Sanada's, you know, hopes of being a top star, because if he's going to be a top star, he sort of has to interact with the other top star who's already a top star, as opposed to Sanada himself being a potential top star right now. God, I'm probably getting really convoluted right now. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if Sanada wants to be a top guy, he has to find out a way to get a great match with Okada, because Okada can get a great match with everyone. And if Sanada's the weak link here, then that's really going to affect Sanada's attempts to actually become a top guy in the company. Anyways, I've lasted too long on this. As I said, match 4 stars wasn't the best match of the tournament, obviously. We've usually come to expect the best matches coming in the finals, at least for the G1. With the New Japan Cup, we've sort of been resigned to the fact that the best match is probably going to be a semi-final or a quarterfinal or even an opening match, just because the New Japan Cup obviously isn't as big a tournament as the G1. But yeah, so we now come to the end of the New Japan Cup. So I'll just go over the post-match interactions that happened after Okada got the win, and then I'll give my final thoughts on the tournament overall. So Okada went on mic and he called out Jay to make the official challenge for his IWGP Heavyweight title. Jay came down to the ring and he was getting fantastic heat from the crowd. They were immediately booing him, and even when he went on mic to speak, he kept getting interrupted just by the crowd booing him and, you know, jeering him. And I was thinking to myself, this interaction right now with the crowd speaking over Jay, this is almost too comical and too out of the ordinary for the Japanese crowd, that almost makes me think that maybe New Japan has some plants in the audience who they're trying to get this moment out of. And I also think that way sometimes when I hear, it always sounds like the same old guy who's leading the chants for all the wrestlers over the last 5 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was a plant, but at the same time, the New Japan crowds, they genuinely dislike Jay White. And it's not go away hate. It's like genuinely just like great heel heat, where they really they're invested in him as a character and they want to see someone beat him. And that's what really makes him stand out. Like I saw a comment on some Reddit thread and it just made the point perfectly, where Jay White, he isn't a cool heel. He isn't a badass heel like Kenny Omega or AJ Styles. And even though we do like heels like that, like we obviously at the end of the day, we do want to see characters who we are invested in and who we like. Well, the Jay White, you're not meant to like him, but that's what makes him so likable, because he's so damn slimy and underhanded. He just makes a great foil for any perfect babyface such as Okada, or even, you know, maybe in future a Naito. So yeah, I thought this was an awesome, just another great little moment to remind us, even though Jay White isn't one of the top guys, he is still a fantastic character. He's probably the best character wrestler on the roster. So yeah, even though I was thinking to myself, this matchup with Okada returning to face Jay White and also returning to try win back his title, I was thinking maybe they're rushing into this a bit, but now I'm thinking to myself, okay, Lewis, let's just put down the brakes. Let's just see how the match itself goes, and let's see where the story is going. Because even though you have your own ideas of fantasy booking New Japan and everything, maybe Geto just might know a bit more than you about how to put on a convincing dramatic story. So maybe just trust in Geto as you've been doing for the last few years. He has his issues, but with the heavyweight title, you know he's always good. So this is me just using my platform of my podcast to leave a message to myself. Lewis, trust in Geto, at least for now. You know, what's the idea? We give the storyline 6 months and then we review. So do that. You know, don't be some fan who's, you know, what do you call him? A fair-weathered fan. Don't be that. Just trust in Geto and all shall be well. The only other thing worth making note of here in the post-match was that after Jay finished with his promo, Okada went on the mic, and even though the crowd was, you know, majority pro Sanada, Okada just immediately won them over with his cheeky, you know, flamboyant remarks where he's basically calling Jay out and making a mockery of him and really getting inside Jay's head and annoying Jay. And yeah, that's just the stuff you love about Okada, because even though he can play a fantastic heel, he can, on the other hand, just immediately go and win over the crowd. This also makes me think back to when he faced Naito at Wrestle Kingdom 12. And even though the majority of that crowd was entirely pro Naito, like some of them probably had a bit of reservations being like, oh, I like Okada so much, but I also like Naito. But no, the majority of them, maybe like 80% were pro Naito. And Okada, after he won the match and basically shocked everyone and deflated a lot of LIJ fans, when he went on the mic and he gave his speech where he's like, you know, I can't wait to continue leading New Japan, everyone was like really polite, they clapped for him, and he even got like some really strong support. So it's really cool to see that the story of Okada being kept apart from the IWGP title, it really is paying off in building up sympathy for him, even when he's still, I guess, sort of gets a bit of the Superman booking like he did here with winning the entire tournament. Not to say that that itself is the Superman booking, but, it fits into the idea of Okada getting everything handed to him. So, yeah, I will give a proper review for the MSG show closer to that date. For now, I'll just say I can go either way on the result. I can imagine Jay winning, and I can imagine Okada winning. I'll give my reasons for both of those predictions at the prediction show, and I'll also better explain them, obviously. So my final thoughts for the 2019 New Japan Cup, this has to be maybe, in fact, the best New Japan Cup we've ever had, right? Like, not only did we enlarge the roster from whatever it was, like we had like an extra round of matches, there were great matches all over the place. We only had one totally blow-away match, which for me was Okada versus Ishii, and obviously also, by the way, Okada, he was absolutely my MVP for the tournament. I'll run over his matches a bit later on, well, in a few minutes or seconds, I guess, but yeah, a lot of the New Japan Cup tournaments have been a bit disappointing in past, especially last year. People were really raving about that one, but if you're like me and you're not super into Zack Sabre Jr.'s style, as you guys are probably sick to death of me talking about, then that tournament, the 2018 tournament, didn't really do too much for you. And obviously that was the case with me. A lot of the other tournaments, they've usually had a few like standout matches, but even the semi-finals and finals themselves have never been too great. It's usually always been the booking and the story of the tournaments themselves that have been more interesting. Like in 2016, it was the story of Naito. Like he did have an amazing match against Ishii, and I think he had a very good match against Goto in the finals, but the real appeal there was the fact that, oh wow, Naito, he won the tournament, and now he's finally going to get a chance at the title. And for 2017, it was a similar story where Shibata, he had a fantastic match against Ishii, but then the real story there, like the real appeal was he won the tournament and then he's going to get a shot at the title. And last year, again, if you're not into, I'm not going to go into that again, but here we had great matches all over the place, and at minimum we had a bunch of very good matches. There were a bunch of matches where people were a bit sort of short with, where they're like, oh yeah, I didn't like this, and then I'm just here sitting like, wow, damn, I thought that was very good. So let's run over why Okada is my MVP for the tournament. Obviously, in the first place, it helps that he made it all the way to the finals and actually ended up winning it, so he left a bigger impact on me. Plus, it also helps that he's my favorite wrestler of all time. So yeah, obviously I'm a bit biased here, but look, let's look at his matches. His first round match against Michael Elgin, that was a low-tier great match. I gave that 3 3/4 stars to about 4 stars. I thought that was, very, very good, even, like, as I said, low-tier great. Then he had his match against Mikey Nichols. That was pretty disappointing. I only gave that 3 stars, but Mikey Nichols was such a non-entity, we don't really know what to expect from him, and so you can't really be too negative about it. I did think they still had some fun interactions in the second half, so I ended up going about 3 stars on that. Then Okada had his match with who was his next match with? Oh yeah, then it was the match with Ospreay, and at the time that I saw that was my immediate match of the tournament. I thought that was a fantastic match, both the big Chaos guys going up against each other. I gave that 4 1/4 stars. Then he had his even more amazing, his incredible match against Ishii. Look, I've already gone over that, so I'm not going to dwell on that. And then he had the match against Sonata, which, as I've said, you just heard me say, for all its issues, it did still end up being great in the end. So yeah, for me, Okada was the clear wrestler of the tournament. I've seen some other people suggest Ishii. For me, he's really the only other guy you can suggest. Like, if you were totally infatuated with his first round match against Nagata, which a lot of people were, then, I can understand that alongside his match with Yoshi-Hashi and his match with Okada, both of which were fantastic matches. I can imagine that being enough evidence for you to think, oh yeah, Ishii was totally my wrestler of the tournament. But for me, obviously being biased, being mega into Okada, thinking that his style is superior to all others, for me, it was just obvious that Okada was the best wrestler of the tournament. It was just a happy coincidence that he managed to win the entire thing, which obviously is the cherry on top for me. It's obviously also cool to see Sonata finally getting a bit of a decent push. Who knows if this is actually going to lead into him getting a decent singles push for the Never title or even the IC title. I really hope that's the case. Even though I don't think he's championship material for the IWGP Heavyweight title just yet, he has shown a lot of glimpses of greatness. He still has a long way to go, but I wouldn't be surprised if he starts getting a few IC title challenges. Like, as I've said, New Japan, you need to start building up your younger guys. You've been relying on, Naito and Tanahashi and Okada, and even though, like Naito and Okada, they're relatively young, I guess, at least compared to Tanahashi, you do really need to start investing in your young guys. Like, that's what you did with Okada. He was only 24 when he won the title, so, Sonata's like 30 or 31. We've also got Evil in the background. If you get rid of his really lame Grim Reaper gimmick, then maybe he and Sonata, maybe you can slowly start building them up and you can have your next generation of big stars. So, yeah, for the tournament overall, I think I'd have to rate this 7 out of 10. And you'll probably, I imagine some people will be surprised at me giving that rating, which relatively just means it was a good or a very good tournament after I said that this was the best New Japan Cup ever. And yeah, I guess it's no secret that if you've listened to what I've been saying, I'm not the biggest fan of the New Japan Cup. I think they usually have a lot of great matches, but overall as a tournament, they're sort of disjointed and they don't often have a very clear story. And, some of the matches are a bit dull, but yeah, this was still a very worthwhile tournament, the best New Japan Cup that I've seen. And looking back at the other tournaments they've had, looking at their match lineups, there's nothing that stands out to me as being anything that could challenge the 2019 New Japan Cup. So yeah, congrats to New Japan. They continue to just not knock it out of the park, but they continue to be very, very strong, coming off of this really calamitous time where they've lost Kenny Omega. He was their champion for the second half of last year, and it's like, oh, how are they going to recover? But yeah, it looks like things are going really well. This finally brings me to the end of my review of the New Japan Cup finals. Obviously, that's also the quarterfinals and semifinals, but hey, who's keeping track? So the things to look forward to, I am still planning on doing a review of Noah's Great Voyage and Yokohama show. I still just have to watch the final match between Marufuji and Kiyomiya. I still haven't seen that. I've seen a lot of people talking that match up, so I'm very excited to watch that. I might actually go watch that now, in fact. So I'm going to be getting that review out. I'm sorry this is the review of the Noah show is going to be a bit late. It's just because I was very busy, plus I had to try keep up with the New Japan Cup matches, and I'm also planning on reviewing All Japan's 319 show from Kurikan Hall, and I'm also going to be doing in that review a brief sort of overview of their other Dream Series matches. So yeah, and that's the show that has the Strong BJ versus Violent Giants rematch, I believe, and it also has a match between Koji Iwamoto and Kotaro Suzuki, as well as the Triple Crown match between Miyahara and Naoya Nomura. So those are other matches I'm very excited to look forward, very excited to view and review. So yeah, those All Japan and Noah reviews, keep your eyes out for them. They'll be a bit late because, as I said, I've been focused on New Japan, but yeah, keep looking forward to I've messed this all up. Usually I go back and edit this, but you know what? At the end of the day, I can't really be bothered. Check me out on Twitter at PureGradePuro. That's PureGrade Puro. You can check out the podcast on YouTube, Podbean, and iTunes. Links for all of those platforms should be in the description of whatever player you're looking on. If you are listening to this on Extreme Wrestling Torrents, then just search the Pure Grade Pro Wrest podcast, which is just Pure Grade Pro Wrest without the podcast bit. Look that up on YouTube, Podbean, and iTunes, as I said. And yeah, okay, I'm finally out of here. I started rambling a bit at the end. Sorry, guys. Sorry about the thing, saying over and over again. But yeah, we've another episode has come to an end. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Goodbye forever. See you soon.